The grand chandelier reflected off the polished marble floors, scattering prisms of light across the hall where laughter and soft music intertwined. In the center of it all, Darius Westbrook sat stiffly at a corner table, glass of champagne untouched in his hand. His tailored navy suit fit impeccably, a subtle reminder of wealth that had followed him since his first business deal, yet the presence of all those eyes, all the conversations with undertones of curiosity and calculation, made him feel strangely naked. It wasn't that Darius disliked attention, it was that he craved authenticity, and authenticity seemed as absent as the warm summer breeze that fluttered outside the banquet hall's open French doors. He glanced around, noting how guests whispered behind their hands, occasionally glancing at him, some bold enough to approach with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Invitations to small talk, fleeting introductions. He had attended countless weddings before, but this one felt different. It was less about celebration and more like a parade of intent, each person silently evaluating what he could offer, what advantage he could grant them. Darius shifted uncomfortably, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve, the weight of expectation pressing heavier with each passing moment. He'd been here less than an hour, and yet it already felt like a lifetime. A waiter passed by with a tray of canapes, and Darius barely registered it, lost in a swirl of reflection. Weddings were meant to be joyous, but for him, they often became mirrors showing everything he lacked in personal connection. He was a man of numbers, deals, and public admiration, yet the casual laughter of friends and families made him painfully aware of the life he had built without someone who truly knew him. He leaned back, watching a young couple dance across the polished floor, moving in tandem as if the world belonged solely to them. The scene made him ache for simplicity, for the comfort of shared ease rather than the transactional charm surrounding him. A soft voice broke through the haze of his thoughts. "Excuse me, would you like a dance?" Darius turned sharply, expecting the rehearsed smile of another guest with hidden motives. Instead, he found himself facing a woman whose presence seemed to quietly demand neither admiration nor concession. She had dark, confident eyes that didn't flinch under his scrutiny, and a gentle smile that suggested she understood the discomfort of standing alone. "I'm Alara Quinn," she said, tilting her head slightly, her tone almost conspiratorial. "I noticed you sitting here. Sometimes it's easier to survive weddings if you have a companion. I can pretend to be yours, if you'd like." Darius blinked, caught off guard by the audacity and simplicity of the offer. There was no underlying interest, no fluttering of opportunism in her gaze. It was straightforward, almost comforting. "Pretend?" he asked cautiously, unsure if he should feel relief or suspicion. "Yes," she replied lightly. "Pretend to be together. You look like you could use a shield from those looking for an angle. I can help with that, just for the afternoon." She didn't laugh, she didn't flutter, she simply extended her hand. There was something in her demeanor that felt refreshing, something genuine in the midst of the calculated smiles and veiled glances of the other guests. Darius, who had mastered suspicion as a survival skill in boardrooms and social events alike, surprised himself by taking her hand. It was a small act, but it felt like permission to breathe again. Once joined together, the world seemed to adjust subtly around them. Alara guided him with gentle assurance through clusters of people, offering subtle introductions and deflecting insincere conversation with humor and tact. She laughed lightly at awkward questions, replying with just enough charm to satisfy social norms without conceding any personal detail. Darius felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he followed her through the reception hall, noticing for the first time the small joys, the clinking of glasses, the delicate scent of fresh flowers, the soft hum of a string quartet tuning for their next set. The isolation he had felt, palpable and almost oppressive, began to recede. With Alara beside him, the room transformed from a theater of potential judgment into a playground of possibilities, each interaction slightly more manageable, slightly more human. As they moved to a quieter corner, away from the most observant eyes, Alara leaned in just enough to speak privately. "Tell me," she said softly, "what would make today feel more like a celebration instead of a spectacle for you?" Darius hesitated, and used to such openness. He wanted to tell her the truth about his life, the constant balancing act between visibility and privacy, the loneliness that accompanied his success, but years of caution held his words hostage. Instead, he offered a lighter version of himself, careful but sincere, and found that the act of speaking, even partially, eased the tightness in his chest. Alara listened, nodding with understanding, never pressing further, never probing beyond what he was ready to give. It was a subtle form of respect, and Darius felt a rare sense of being seen. The afternoon unfolded in a slow rhythm of shared tasks and quiet observation. Alara guided Darius through arranging place cards, adjusting floral displays, and even tasting small desserts to provide honest, impartial feedback, a role she framed with playful authority. Each small act grounded him, connecting him to the normalcy of a wedding's gentle chaos. Laughter started to seep naturally into the conversation, small jokes exchanged about the ever-disappearing utensils or the stubborn tablecloths. Darius discovered himself chuckling, a sound that felt genuine rather than polite. For the first time in months, perhaps years, the constraints of wealth and status seemed momentarily irrelevant, replaced by human connection that was authentic, light, and unexpectedly comforting. As the music swelled and couples moved to the dance floor, Alara offered her hand. Darius accepted, feeling the strange thrill of unfamiliar normalcy. They swayed gently, neither needing to speak much, their presence alone a silent agreement of mutual understanding. Guests occasionally glanced at them, but instead of feeling scrutinized, Darius found himself relaxing. The veneer of performance lifted slightly, replaced by the quiet warmth of companionship, something he hadn't realized he'd been craving. Alara's laughter, soft and unguarded, became a tether to reality, a reminder that even in the world of glimmering wealth and endless expectation, moments of genuine connection could still exist. Later, while taking a brief break near the outdoor terrace, Darius watched the sunset filter through the windows, painting the hall in shades of amber and rose. He realized that for the first time in a long while, he hadn't felt the usual pressure to analyze motives, to weigh every smile, every compliment for hidden intentions. Beside him, Alara was laughing at an anecdote from a catering mishap, her eyes alight with warmth. He found himself wanting to hear more, not out of curiosity or strategic interest, but because he genuinely enjoyed her company. It was disorienting, and yet welcome. Darius made a quiet promise to himself to embrace this unexpected reprieve from his carefully curated world, even if only for a few hours, even if it began as a simple act of pretending. The evening's crescendo approached as dinner was served and the main festivities began. Darius felt a curious sense of anticipation rather than dread. Alara had created a safe bubble, and within it, he felt his defenses relaxing for the first time. They moved seamlessly together through introductions, dances, and light conversation, her presence a shield against the subtle scheming and opportunism that surrounded him. With each passing moment, Darius felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps connection wasn't as elusive as he had believed, and perhaps the walls he had constructed around himself could one day be softened, starting here, at a wedding he had entered reluctantly, but now navigated with unexpected ease. As the evening's first dance concluded and the couple cut their cake, Darius and Alara found themselves at the terrace again, gazing at the city skyline twinkling under the fading twilight. "Thank you," he said quietly, unsure why the words felt both necessary and insufficient. "For what?" she asked, with a small smile that suggested she already knew. "For being genuine. For letting me forget, even briefly, that I'm supposed to be untouchable, unapproachable, untethered." Alara's smile softened, and for the first time, Darius felt the weight of his carefully maintained solitude lift, replaced by the quiet, profound relief of simply being allowed to exist as a person, not as a brand or a fortune. By the time the night had fully descended and the last guests lingered over champagne, Darius realized something unexpected. He was looking forward to tomorrow, not because of obligations or opportunities, but because of the simple possibility of seeing Alara again, sharing another day of genuine moments, and perhaps beginning to understand what it meant to let someone in. And as he watched her laugh with a small group of staff, effortlessly charming yet grounded, he understood that today's connection, though begun as a pretense, might be the first step towards something lasting, something real, something that even wealth and caution couldn't overshadow. The morning after the wedding, Darius awoke to the quiet hum of the city outside his high-rise apartment, the sunlight spilling across the polished wooden floor. He replayed the previous day in his mind, the laughter, the soft warmth of Alara's presence, the rare moments where he had felt like just another guest rather than a man defined by his fortune. Something about the ease of that day lingered, a quiet insistence that he could explore connection without suspicion or motive. By mid-morning, his phone buzzed with messages regarding corporate matters, but for once, he ignored them, choosing instead to meet Alara at the event hall, where a minor catering mishap had erupted. Alara was already on site, her dark hair pulled back into a practical bun, her crisp uniform slightly dusted with flour and rose petals. She spotted him immediately and smiled, a mixture of relief and mild exasperation, as if she had expected him to vanish once the night's illusion was over. "You made it," she said, though her tone carried both surprise and subtle caution. "I didn't know if you'd want to continue, or if pretending yesterday was enough." Darius shrugged, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, feeling the unusual sensation of wanting to be seen without having to shield anything. "I figured if you survived that cake disaster, I might as well help. Not everyone gets a volunteer willing to carry trays and fold napkins," he said lightly, though the sincerity of his tone was unmistakable. Throughout the day, Darius immersed himself in the flurry of preparations, moving between tables, assisting staff, and offering suggestions that were practical rather than flashy. He guided the setup of delicate floral arrangements, adjusting petals and ribbon with surprising attentiveness, sometimes pausing to comment on the finer details of color and symmetry. Alara watched him, a quiet curiosity flickering in her eyes. His gestures were natural, his attention sincere, and yet there was something elusive about him that made her heart hesitate. He never spoke of his own life, his family, or his work, and she sensed layers beneath the calm exterior. There was charm, yes, but also a guardedness that refused easy understanding. And when a woman from a high society circle recognized him and started approaching with a wide smile and forced familiarity, Alara stepped in deftly. She linked arms with him and interjected, steering the encounter with playful authority. "Darius here? He's far too busy helping me with the arrangements with no time for chit-chat." Her confidence created a shield, but it also prompted Darius to notice how effortlessly she commanded respect without demanding it. As the afternoon stretched into evening, a gentle ease settled between them. Between arranging chairs and testing lighting, Darius and Alara spoke in small bursts about themselves, revealing fragments of their personalities without revealing names or titles. He shared stories of travel, childhood mischief, and the oddities of social gatherings, careful to keep the conversation grounded yet personal. She responded with her own stories of growing up in a suburban neighborhood, helping her mother organize events, and the small joy she found in seeing the world unfold in tiny, perfect moments. With each exchange, the artificial barrier of the pretend date blurred slightly, replaced by laughter that felt unforced, trust that felt tentative yet growing. However, by mid-afternoon, the careful illusion began to falter. Darius, in his desire to assist, made a call to a high-end supplier to expedite a last-minute floral arrangement, mentioning connections that seemed to astonish Alara. She watched quietly as he navigated the conversation with ease, securing immediate delivery. Something in her chest tightened, a flicker of suspicion mingled with concern. "Darius," she said gently, after the call ended, "I'm curious. How did you know that person, and how could you get that arranged so quickly?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the question. It was a question he had anticipated might come eventually, and yet he had hoped to delay it. "I have some friends in the industry," he offered vaguely, careful not to disclose too much. But Alara's gaze lingered, her expression sharp. She sensed the truth. There was more behind the calm exterior than she had realized. Later, as the event drew to a close and staff began packing up, Alara decided to confront the unease that had settled between them. "I need to know, Darius," she said firmly, leaning against a countertop, her arms crossed. "Who are you really? Why are you here helping like this, and why do I feel like you're holding back the most important part of yourself?" Darius swallowed, feeling the tension in his chest tighten. He was about to offer her a glimpse of honesty when the soft vibration of his phone interrupted him. "A corporate emergency," demanding his immediate attention. He excused himself quickly, the words hurried and lacking warmth, leaving Alara staring after him with a mixture of disappointment and concern. His absence left a hollow space that the day's laughter had briefly filled. The following week, Alara extended an invitation to a corporate gala, a subtle challenge wrapped in cordiality. She had observed his skills and charm, his capacity for empathy and action, and she wanted to see if the man who had charmed her with authenticity could reconcile with the truth of his life. Darius accepted, though with a lingering awareness that he would soon be exposed. At the gala, the moment arrived. Robert Langston, a high-profile business associate, approached, recognition instant on his face. "Darius Westbrook?" he asked with raised eyebrows. And in that instant, the private man who had helped arrange flowers and laughed over spilled sugar was revealed to be none other than the CEO of Westbrook Global Enterprises. The revelation hit Alara like a gust of wind. Her gaze, once warm and open, narrowed with hurt and betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, voice steady yet laced with pain, once the crowd's attention had moved elsewhere. "I thought I knew you, at least the part of you that mattered," she added softly, her eyes searching for any remnant of the man she had connected with. Darius, caught between the urge to confess and the demands of his high-pressure world, faltered. I didn't want to interfere with what we had," he admitted quietly, his eyes sincere. "I wanted you to see me, not the name, not the fortune. I wanted you to see me for who I am, not what I own." Alara's expression remained guarded, a delicate balance of anger, hurt, and lingering affection. She needed time to process the duality of the man before her, the charming, attentive companion, and the powerful, untouchable CEO. The evening continued with a tense equilibrium. Despite the revelation, they presented a united front, navigating the gala's grandeur with grace, Darius careful to respect her space, Alara careful to maintain her dignity. Yet beneath the polished smiles, the tension simmered. By the end of the night, Alara spoke again, her voice quieter but resolute. "I need time," she said, turning toward the exit with a mixture of farewell and challenge. Darius nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't acceptance either. It was a reminder that authenticity, while precious, could not thrive without trust, and trust required more than charm or pretense. It required transparency, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. In the days that followed, Darius reflected deeply on the interaction, recognizing that his desire to shield his wealth and identity had inadvertently risked the one connection he had felt was real. He realized that while he had succeeded in shielding himself from opportunists for years, he had also shielded himself from love, intimacy, and the simple, unguarded joy of genuine companionship. The juxtaposition of these truths left him restless, questioning not only how he presented himself to the world, but how he wanted to exist within it. Alara's brief presence had shattered the carefully constructed walls, leaving him both exposed and, paradoxically, free. He made a decision to confront the truths he had avoided for years, to navigate the complexity of his identity with honesty, and to bridge the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be. He knew the path forward would require patience, humility, and a willingness to accept consequences, yet he felt, for the first time, that these were challenges worth facing. Alara, with her perceptive eyes and unwavering authenticity, had ignited a spark within him, a reminder that human connection, when unmasked, could transform the isolation of even the wealthiest life into something profoundly alive, deeply resonant, and unexpectedly tender. 3 months passed in a quiet, purposeful rhythm that contrasted sharply with the relentless pace of Darius Westbrook's previous life. The man who had once existed entirely in boardrooms, gala dinners, and calculated social maneuvers had begun to embrace a different kind of engagement, one that demanded vulnerability, humility, and an openness he had rarely allowed himself. Days were filled with therapy sessions, discussions that probed not profits but emotions, moments where he allowed himself to confront the loneliness he had long disguised beneath wealth and achievement. Evenings were spent volunteering at the Children's Hospital, where laughter came unprompted and gratitude was not transactional but genuine. Each interaction chipped away at the rigid walls he had built, revealing a man who was learning, painfully and patiently, what it meant to exist without armor. It was on one such evening, while helping a young boy navigate the complex world of hospital beds and coloring sheets, that Darius met Margaret. She was an older volunteer with a gentle authority who observed him with a quiet, discerning gaze. She had noticed the shift in him over the preceding weeks, the way he had started to listen instead of instruct, to give without expectation, to act with empathy rather than strategy. "You're not the same man I saw at that wedding," she said kindly. He, forting and challenging. Darius paused, coloring pencil in hand, and allowed himself a small, reflective smile. "I'm trying not to be," he admitted softly. Margaret nodded knowingly. "Then don't waste the chance to set things right with her," she advised, and without needing further clarification, Darius understood she meant Alara. He had felt the weight of their unfinished story lingering like a shadow, and now the opportunity to confront it with honesty was tangible, real, and necessary. He sought her out, tracking her schedule through the careful hints she had shared during their brief encounters since the gala. When he found her, she was in a sunlit courtyard, guiding the setup for an outdoor event with precision and care, her dark hair glinting in the afternoon light. Darius approached cautiously, aware of the fragile balance between hope and resentment in her expression. "Alara," he began, voice low, carrying the earnestness of months of reflection. "I've spent these last months understanding the man I was, and the man I want to be with you. I made mistakes, and I hid too much, but I've changed. I'm asking for another chance, not for a pretense, not for convenience, but for something real, slow, honest." Her eyes widened slightly, emotion flickering across her face in a mixture of surprise, skepticism, and something softer, something hopeful. She studied him quietly, searching for signs of pretense, the familiar protective walls that had once made their bond feel both thrilling and incomplete. "Darius," she said finally, her voice measured, "I care about you. That hasn't changed. But I need to be sure that what you're offering is genuine, that you're not hiding behind wealth or influence, or trying to create the version of yourself you think I'll like. I need the man who danced beside me at the wedding, not the CEO everyone knows." He nodded earnestly, the weight of her words settling deep within him. "That man is who I've been trying to become," he said softly. "I've stepped back from business, started therapy, and found ways to connect with the world and people without my title guiding every action. I want to show you the real me, without barriers." Their reconciliation was deliberate and unhurried. They began with small moments, shared coffee in the early morning, walks through quiet parks, evenings of conversation that weren't measured by obligation or social expectation. Each interaction was a test of authenticity, a reminder that trust had to be rebuilt through action rather than words alone. Slowly, tentatively, they rediscovered one another. Laughter returned, not the performative chuckle of polite society, but genuine amusement at each other's quirks, the warmth of shared history, and the unfolding of new memories. Darius found himself marveling at how easily comfort and joy could now coexist with affection, and Alara began to feel the steady presence of a man willing to confront his own vulnerabilities. Months of careful effort culminated one evening at a modest gathering celebrating a mutual friend's milestone. As music played softly in the background, Darius and Alara found themselves drawn to the small dance floor, the world around them fading into a gentle blur. He offered his hand, not as a gesture of pretense, but as a symbol of trust, and she accepted, allowing herself to be led into a slow, flowing dance. There was no rush, no expectation, only the quiet, profound intimacy of two people learning to navigate connection with honesty. As they moved together, words became unnecessary, the rhythm of their bodies and hearts conveying what had taken months of conversation, reflection, and courage to articulate. In that moment, the distance between their past misunderstandings and present understanding dissolved, leaving only the possibility of a future built on transparency, patience, and mutual respect. At the end of the evening, when the music softened to its final notes, Darius leaned close, his forehead resting against hers. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me the chance to be real, for letting me show you who I truly am, and for letting me see you without pretense." Alara smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion, a mixture of relief, trust, and affection. "We're starting slowly," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "But I want this, if we're honest with each other, every step of the way." And as the city lights twinkled around them, they shared a kiss that was unhurried, tender, and emblematic of a new beginning, a beginning not defined by wealth, appearances, or pretense, but by the courage to embrace vulnerability, honesty, and the quiet, enduring magic of love nurtured with intention. In the weeks that followed, their bond strengthened, grounded in trust and shared experiences. They learned the nuances of each other's lives. Darius's meticulous attention to detail softened by the empathy he had cultivated, Alara's playful pragmatism deepened by patience and understanding. Arguments, when they arose, were navigated with care, each difference approached as a bridge to understanding rather than a barrier. Slowly, the walls that had once defined Darius's existence, walls built of protection, prestige, and careful calculation, were dismantled, replaced by openness, communication, and the shared joy of simply being together. Love, they discovered, was not instantaneous or perfect, but it was resilient, deliberate, and profoundly transformative. Moral lesson: true connection demands courage, honesty, and patience. It cannot flourish behind walls of pretense or privilege. Love grows when two people allow themselves to be vulnerable, to share both triumphs and fears, and to witness one another authentically. By embracing imperfection, practicing empathy, and choosing intentional, small steps toward understanding, relationships transform into spaces of trust, joy, and mutual respect. Wealth, status, or social advantage cannot replace sincerity. The journey of Darius and Alara reminds us that real intimacy requires courage, reflection, and time, and that the most enduring bonds are built not on facades but on truth, openness, and compassion. Like this story? Share it with friends, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more heartfelt tales, and hit like to celebrate stories of love, growth, and authentic connection.